Now let's look at some of the specific factors that can affect democratic breakdown. And these are factors that are not structural factors, but elements of behavior, strategy, choice, and action that Lentz puts enormous emphasis on. First is regime performance. We have seen that a crucial variable in determining the viability of democracy, particularly again when the underlying social and economic conditions are not highly favorable, is the regime performance in an economic sense. Has the democratic system of government shown the ability to address the country's social and economic problems, at least with moderate and sustainable economic growth, and importantly, in the context of countries with deep social inequality, in terms of the ability to address some of the social inequities that have historically emerged and marginalized the poor, indigenous groups, women, and so on. Lentz emphasizes that it is important for a new democracy not to let problems fester and become acute or unsolvable. That when problems of an economic or social nature emerge, it could be as a result of inheriting them from the previous regime, or it could be, for example, inflation that's beginning to spin out of control, or fiscal deficits. If politicians seek to merely kick these cans down the road while they pursue what's politically to their advantage in the very short term, then the problems will gather momentum. And we know both with fiscal deficits and inflation that if they're not checked and addressed in a searching and serious way early on, they can really get out of control and develop a lot of hidden momentum. So we're looking here not only at the performance of the moment, but the choices and policies that actors embrace that can have profound consequences for the shape that a democratic system will be in some years down the road. Then this has an impact, or it has implications for how the agenda of government is defined. Particularly when new democracies come into power. Are they going to sober, to some extent, people's expectations, level with them about what's possible in the short term, draft budgets and craft promises that are deliverable and sustainable? Or are they going to raise unreasonable expectations that will overtax limited budgetary resources as well as political capital and perhaps propel a country down the road to unsustainable deficits and hyperinflation? There is a logic then, obviously, to trying to address inherited social inequities and injustices, but also to crafting the initial agenda in a way that's realistic and does not set up the country and the elected government for severe disappointment on the part of the public. This suggests to new political leaders the value of conserving political capital. You want to score some early successes in terms of what you achieve. Have a view to the long run in terms of what the interests of the country are. But understand that no new democratic government can right every injustice politically or socially and economically in a matter of 4 or 5 years. And so some of the most difficult problems may need, in terms of the reform agenda, to be deferred. And a smart and shrewd democratic leader in the new or early stages of democracy will have a strategy for phasing in the reform agenda and phasing in some of the vested interests and constituencies that need to be confronted, so that you don't confront everybody at once and expend all of your political capital in a quixotic struggle to deliver transformative social change in one fell swoop. This is why some radical presidencies fail in new democracies, because the agenda is too sweeping, too unrealistic, and beyond the means of the elected government to deliver. And so their constituencies get profoundly disappointed. Polarization gets set in motion, and the system cannot adjust. But we have seen that economic performance is not the only type of performance that the citizens of a democracy, including a new democracy, value. That they value how a government governs as well. Is it respecting the rule of law? Is it affirming liberty? Do people feel free? Do people feel that the rules are being respected? That there's free and fair electoral competition? That there's the right to speak out, criticize, and dissent? That there's a rule of law? That the Constitution is being respected? And then there are two other dimensions of political performance that are very important. One, as we have seen, is controlling corruption. Do people feel that the government is honest, or at least is working for the public benefit? Or do they feel that all the politicians are liars, thieves, and crooks who only want to get into office to get rich and steal public funds? And do people feel safe? Do they feel secure? Or do they live in fear, not necessarily of the state, but of non-state actors, either because of insurgency or because of rampant criminal, and in this day and age, unfortunately, often drug-related organized criminal violence, as we see, for example, historically in a previous era, spinning out of control in Colombia. Now we see reaching a very high pitch in some parts of Mexico. People value these political dimensions of performance, we find from public opinion survey research, no less than the economic dimensions of performance. And sometimes a government can have more scope to deliver early on in political performance than in economic performance, or at least to meet public expectations more quickly. In particular, respecting the rights of ordinary citizens to speak and publish, organize and assemble as they wish, that is something that largely involves forbearance on the part of elected rulers and a commitment to democratic norms rather than achieving positive things that may be very difficult and uncertain. Even maintaining order in a context of endemic violence and crime could take a number of years to organize a better police force and a system of internal security, and to build up the state. This is to very considerable extent a state-building function. Improvement in the rule of law requires not only effective democratic policing, but building up the capacity of the judiciary. These are things that don't happen overnight. But the government can, by its choices and decisions, set up institutions of horizontal accountability to more effectively control corruption. A president can choose whether or not he or she is going to govern in a intensely clientelistic and rent-seeking fashion, in which corruption becomes really the logic of governance, or whether they're going to exercise restraint, impose restraint on their fellow party members, starting with the cabinet, fire cabinet members who are suspected of engaging in egregious corruption, and emphasize really in a very spirited and concerted way the importance of providing public goods and transparently expending public resources. So all of these are dimensions of political performance that heavily affect the way that citizens view their government and may actually have at least as much impact in shaping feelings and perceptions of political legitimacy as the social and economic dimensions of performance. And of course, they're not unrelated. If you have good political performance in terms of controlling corruption, maintaining order, and respecting the rule of law, it will create a political enabling environment in which it will be more possible to form and implement solutions to improve social and economic well-being. Another dimension of performance that's very challenging from a new democratic standpoint in particular. So we're talking now about the weeks, months, and perhaps initial years immediately following a transition to democracy is, how do you treat the old authoritarian order? How do you balance the need on the one hand for accountability, the demands for justice, and for punishing the crimes of the past, with the need to avoid a new political or legitimacy crisis by gratuitously alienating the military or the old authoritarian elite who might be seen to have been responsible for very despicable acts of torture and violation of the human rights of their fellow citizens. On the one hand, a new democracy wants at a minimum and needs at a minimum to stigmatize the crimes of the past and make it clear that torture is never acceptable, that political imprisonment is something that was a violation of human rights, and to recognize the suffering that many people unjustly experienced in the old authoritarian period. On the other hand, if you seek to identify specific individuals, try and punish them, then you could drive their old authoritarian parties, which may still have considerable power, and the institutions responsible for those crimes, the army, the police, the intelligence apparatus, and so on, into fearful and hostile opposition to the new regime. And of course, the goal should be to give the old elites and to give the surviving institutions a stake in the new political orders so that they feel that they're part of the system and it's not a system that's hostile to them and threatening their most fundamental interests. But there is a tension here between justice and stabilization that cannot be avoided, cannot be ignored, cannot be denied. And so this tension is one of the most difficult challenges that a new democracy has to ponder and face